March 11, 1945. Kanoi Air Base, Kyushu, Japan. The hand of the intelligence officer trembled as he studied reconnaissance photographs from submarine I-47, recording an observation that would haunt Japanese naval command for the remainder of the war. Concrete vessel observed. No armament visible. Heavy refrigeration equipment. Multiple small craft conducting transfers. Classification: unknown logistics vessel. Through grainy periscope photography taken near Ulithi et al., he had documented something that contradicted everything the Imperial Japanese Navy understood about warfare priorities. While pilots at his airfield extracted pine root oil to supplement aviation fuel, a desperate program, employing 34,000 distillation units that would yield only 3,000 barrels total. While mechanics drained industrial alcohol from equipment to power aircraft, the Americans had deployed what appeared to be a non-combat vessel dedicated entirely to refrigeration. 24 Yokosuka P-1Y-1 France's bombers sat on the runway for Operation 10 No. 2. The pilots, many with less than 50 hours of flight training, would fly their explosives-laden aircraft into the American fleet at Ulithi. What none of them knew was that they were attacking an enemy that had built a $1 million floating factory producing 500 gallons of ice cream per shift, 5 tons daily of frozen dessert, while Japanese forces scraped pine bark for fuel. The first hints emerged through prisoner interrogations after the Battle of Light Gulf. In October 1944, when the carrier Zuikaku sank on October 25th, American destroyers rescued Japanese sailors from the oil-slicked waters. The destroyers Wakatsuki and Kyowa rescued 862 officers and men, while 840 crew members perished. These survivors, expecting execution, instead reported receiving medical treatment and food, including something they had never encountered: frozen cream served in metal cups. One survivor's account, preserved in Allied interrogation files, stated, "The American sailor brought me what he called ice cream. I had heard of this dessert, but never tasted it. Here, after the greatest naval battle in history, Americans were serving frozen desserts to enemies we had tried to kill moments before." Vice Admiral Takajiro Onishi, creator of the kamikaze special attack units, suppressed such reports. His pilots needed to believe Americans were weak, unable to endure hardship. How else could the Japanese spirit overcome industrial superiority? The truth would destroy what remained of fighting morale. The first documented Japanese observation came through submarine reconnaissance. In December 1944, submarine I-47 under Commander Zenji Arita surfaced near Ulithi for periscope reconnaissance. Before launching Kite-and-Man torpedoes, Arita commanded I-47 from July 10, 1944, through the war's end, conducting multiple special attack missions. Arita's log, preserved in Japanese naval archives, records 0630 hours. Large concrete vessel observed, approximately 80 meters, no armament. Heavy refrigeration equipment on deck. Multiple small craft conducting transfers. What it spotted was the U.S. Navy's barge, refrigerated, large, the BRL, converted from an Army concrete barge at a cost of $1 million, equivalent to $17.2 million in 2024. This vessel produced 10 gallons of ice cream every 7 minutes, storing 2,000 gallons of 15F. The barge operated continuously 24 hours daily, 7 days a week, producing 500 gallons per shift, approximately 5 tons daily. By January 1945, Japan's situation had become desperate beyond Western comprehension. Fuel was so scarce that the battleship Yamato could only conduct training exercises at anchor to conserve oil. The pine root oil program, employing 34,000 distillation units and mobilizing for 100,000 workers, including millions of school children, ultimately produced only 3,000 barrels of aviation fuel from 70,000 barrels of pine oil, less than what the U.S. Navy consumed in a single day of operations. The 343rd Naval Air Group Kakutai, Japan's last elite fighter unit commanded by Captain Minoru Gana, architect of Pearl Harbor, struggled with severe malnutrition. Gana commanded this unit from January 15, 1945, tasked with clearing airspace for kamikaze operations. While specific calorie counts aren't documented, pilots reported night blindness from vitamin deficiency, reduced reflexes, and inability to withstand G-forces during combat maneuvers. Captain Jenna himself wrote in operational reports, "My pilots' eyes fail them at night. Malnutrition has stolen their vision. They shake during combat maneuvers from weakness. Yet they face an enemy who grows stronger each day." The contrast was starkest in the kamikaze units preparing for their final missions. These pilots, many teenagers with 40 to 50 hours of flight training, received final meals of rice balls, dried fish, and ceremonial sake before their one-way missions. They wore senembari, thousand-stitch belts sewn by women for spiritual protection, though everyone knew no cloth could protect against anti-aircraft fire. At Kanoi Air Base on March 11, 1945, kamikaze pilots wrote their death poems before boarding their aircraft. One pilot's poem, preserved in the Kanoi Air Base Museum today, reads, "Like cherry blossoms in the spring, let us fall pure and radiant." These pilots died attempting to crash into ships at Ulithi, where USS Randolph CV-15 suffered damage at 2007 hours that evening. One Francis bomber successfully struck the carrier's stern, killing 25 sailors and wounding 105. The carrier was repaired in 3 weeks using 29 tons of structural steel, including I-beams salvaged from a Japanese sugar mill on Saipan, during which time her crew consumed approximately 3,000 gallons of ice cream from base facilities. Ulithi represented something beyond Japanese comprehension. This tiny coral atoll, often omitted from maps, had become the world's largest naval facility. By March 1945, when the kamikaze attacks arrived, 720 ships anchored in its lagoon, more vessels than the entire Japanese Navy ever possessed at its peak. This was the staging point for the Okinawa invasion. Base facilities defied Japanese understanding. Complete machine shops and floating dry docks, fleet post office, handling 20 tons of mail, daily movie theaters showing Hollywood films, baseball diamonds on Mogmog Island, a bakery ship producing fresh bread continuously, USS Abaton distilling seawater, and baking pies, the ice cream barge producing 5 tons daily. The ice cream barge became legendary among American sailors. Destroyer crews whose ships lacked ice cream equipment would send boats with empty containers, returning with gallons of vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry ice cream. The barge served everyone equally, from admirals to seamen, democracy through dairy. Japanese intelligence struggled to comprehend American supply priorities. Captain Tame Ichihara, Japan's most successful destroyer commander, who survived all major battles from Pearl Harbor to war's end, later wrote about learning of American comfort provisions. Hara commanded destroyers Amatsukas and Shigeru, participating in 14 major engagements. "We thought at first the intelligence was wrong," Hara wrote in his memoir. Japanese destroyer captain. "Ships dedicated to ice cream while we scraped for fuel. It was incomprehensible that any navy would prioritize such luxury during total war." Naval intelligence reviewed intercepted American supply manifests that seemed to be in code. Surely ice cream mix meant ammunition. Chocolate syrup indicated fuel oil. Strawberry topping represented medical supplies. No military force would prioritize actual dessert ingredients during intense combat operations, but evidence accumulated relentlessly. Prisoners reported ice cream aboard every American vessel above destroyer size. Reconnaissance showed refrigerated vessels at every American base. Supply manifests consistently included tonnage for morale supplies that exceeded total Japanese food rations for entire fleets. Commander Machitsuro Hashimoto of submarine I-58, who would sink USS Indianapolis on July 30th, 1945, provided the most detailed Japanese observations. During earlier reconnaissance missions at American bases, he observed through his periscope what seemed impossible. In his memoir, Sunk, The Story of the Japanese Submarine Fleet, 1941 to 1945, Hashimoto wrote, "The Americans operated floating cities of abundance, while we counted our last torpedoes, rationed fuel by the liter. They maintained peacetime routines in wartime. This was strength we never imagined, the power to be comfortable during the apocalypse." His executive officer recorded similar observations. "We saw sailors in lines at what appeared to be refreshment stands. Ships transferred not fuel or ammunition, but white containers we later learned contained ice cream. They fought a different war than we did." Japanese pilots shot down and rescued by Americans reported treatment that contradicted everything they had been told. During Operation Kikasui, the 10 mass kamikaze attacks on Okinawa between April and June 1945, captured pilots provided remarkable testimony. One pilot, captured after engine failure prevented his suicide attack. Recorded in post-war interrogation files, the destroyer conducted normal operations. During our attack, no panic among the crew. Men at regular stations except gunners. White uniformed sailors continued serving food. The ship's routine continued. This was not the desperate enemy we expected. What these pilots witnessed, though not understanding it, was American confidence in their anti-aircraft defenses, allowing normal shipboard routines, including food service, to continue during attacks, while kamikaze pilots approached on their death missions. American sailors maintained ice cream service on deck. By 1945, American ice cream production in the Pacific reached an industrial scale that dwarfed entire Japanese food programs. American production, Navy barge at Ulithi, 500 gallons, 10 gallons every 7 minutes. Army ice cream barges, 3 vessels, 1,500 gallons combined. Shipboard production, every carrier, battleship, cruiser had machines. Base facilities, multiple plants per location. 1943 dehydrated mix, 135 million pounds shipped. Army Quartermaster Corps' annual production, 80 million gallons for the military. Japanese reality, pine root oil, 3,000 barrels total from 34,000 distillation units. Aviation fuel reserves were below 1,500,000 barrels by 1945. Civilian calories dropped from 2,000 pre-war to 1,680 by summer 1945. Tokyo rations, 775 calories daily for 6 months in 1946. Pilot training fuel was limited to 40 to 50 hours due to shortage. For perspective, the entire Japanese military's daily rice ration for home island forces totaled less tonnage than American ice cream consumption in the Pacific Theater. Admiral Chester Nimitz, personally approving the ice cream barge, understood something Japanese military hierarchy couldn't accept: that morale wasn't built solely on ideology and sacrifice. In a classified memo, Nimitz wrote, "The Japanese expect our men to endure their conditions and break. We will demonstrate that American industrial might extends to crew comfort. A sailor who knows his country can provide ice cream in combat fights with different confidence than one expecting only hardship." This philosophy extended throughout the Pacific Fleet. The USS Lexington incident at Coral Sea on May 8, 1942, where sailors raided ice cream stores before abandoning ship, became legend. Sailors literally scooped ice cream into their helmets before entering life rafts, demonstrating priorities incomprehensible to Japanese military culture built on suffering as virtue. Japanese naval officers who learned about American ice cream operations faced an impossible choice. How could they maintain fighting spirit when the truth would destroy morale? How could they explain that while Japanese sailors received 315 grams of rice daily, when available, Americans consumed 5 tons of ice cream from a single barge? Rear Admiral Matomi Ugaki, who commanded battleship operations and would lead the final kamikaze mission on August 15, 1945, wrote in his diary after intelligence reports of American comfort levels, "If such reports are true, we have misunderstood this war entirely. Spirit cannot overcome an enemy who brings luxury to battle." The information was classified above top secret. Officers who learned of it were sworn to absolute silence. But truth has a way of seeping through walls of secrecy, spreading through the fleet in whispers and rumors. Japanese radar operators and observers noted B-29 bombers circling at high altitude for no tactical reason. Post-war evidence revealed crews were making ice cream, mixing powdered milk, sugar, and cocoa in ammunition cans using -50°F temperatures at 30,000 feet to freeze the mixture, while turbulence churned it. This level of confidence making dessert over enemy territory that desperately launched fighters, powered by pine root oil, represented civilizational surplus applied to warfare, while Japanese mechanics drained hydraulic fluid to burn as emergency fuel. American air crews improvised ice cream makers at bombing altitude. Operation Kikasui sent 10 massive kamikaze waves against the American fleet at Okinawa. Between April 6 and June 22, 1945, a total of 1,465 kamikaze aircraft and 4,000 Japanese pilots died in these attacks. Japanese pilots flew obsolete aircraft powered by alcohol-diluted fuel. That reduced engine performance by 30%. Their final meals consisted of rice balls and water, often their only substantial food in days. After the massive April 6, 1945, attack involving 355 kamikaze aircraft that sank 6 ships and damaged 20 to others, American fleet reports noted, morale remains high. Ice cream consumption increased 40% post-action. The psychological impact of ice cream after combat cannot be overstated. It represented normalcy, comfort, and home. Japanese naval personnel captured at Okinawa 11,000 to 150 surrendered in total provided detailed accounts that shattered Japanese assumptions. One destroyer officer, pulled from the water after his ship sank, reported through interpreters, "I expected torture, perhaps execution, the treatment we gave American prisoners. Instead, a young American sailor, younger than my youngest brother, brought me ice cream, vanilla, in a metal cup. He seemed embarrassed they had run out of chocolate. I cried, not from gratitude, but from understanding we had already lost. A nation that provides ice cream to enemies had won before fighting began." These accounts, suppressed during the war but documented in occupation records, revealed the gulf between the two forces exceeded anything Japanese command had imagined. During the occupation starting August 1945, American forces distributed ice cream to Japanese children, many tasting it for the first time in their lives. The psychological impact proved profound. Everything the military government had told the Japanese people about American barbarism and weakness was disproven by a simple frozen dessert. Lieutenant Saburo Sakai, Japan's leading surviving ace with 60 for confirmed victories, tasted ice cream for the first time at a U.S. air base in 1946. He later wrote in his memoir, Samurai, "I understood finally why we lost. We fought believing suffering made us strong. They fought with the confidence of abundance. We thought comfort was a weakness. They knew comfort was a right their industry could guarantee anywhere." Statistical reality of two different wars. The final numbers tell the complete story of two nations fighting entirely different kinds of war. American production, 1945, Navy ice cream barge, 500 gallons daily, 10 gallons per 7 minutes. Army barges, 3 vessels, 1,500 gallons daily combined. Total military ice cream, 80 million gallons annually. Dehydrated mix 1943. 135 million pounds shipped globally. Equipment, every ship above destroyer size had ice cream machines. Cost, $1 million per barge, $17.2 million in 2024. Japanese reality, 1945, rice ration, 315 grams per sailor when available. Pine root oil, 3,000 barrels total from 70,000 barrels of pine oil. Workers mobilized, for 100,000 for the Pine Root program. Distillation units, 30 for 1,000 deployed nationwide. Pilot training, reduced to 40 to 50 hours versus 500 plus pre-war. Fuel quality, 30% alcohol mixture reducing engine performance. For Japanese military culture built on Bushido, the way of the warrior, and the acceptance of suffering as spiritual purification, American ice cream ships represented something incomprehensible. They saw comfort not as weakness, but as strength multiplier. Abundance not as decadence, but as strategic advantage. Captain Mitsuo Fukuda, who led the Pearl Harbor attack and survived the war, later converted to Christianity and became a pacifist. Asked about his transformation, he said, "I learned Americans fed ice cream to their enemies. Not just food, luxury food. This was not the barbaric enemy we were told about. This was a civilization so confident in victory they could afford kindness and comfort during war." The ice cream ships challenged every assumption about warfare that Japanese military culture held sacred. At a 1985 U.S.-Japan veteran reunion in Hawaii, the cultural gap remained evident. Former CB Robert Mitchell, who had worked on the Ulithi base, was asked about the ice cream barge by Japanese veterans who still struggled to understand it. 40 years later, Mitchell shrugged. "We figured boys fighting needed ice cream. Didn't seem special at the time. It was just what you did, take care of the troops. If we could build it, why wouldn't we?" This casual attitude that ice cream was so normal, so expected that its provision in wartime seemed unremarkable, illustrated the gulf between the navies better than any battle statistics. Former kamikaze pilot trainer Tadamasa Itatsu, who attended the reunion, responded, We train boys to die with empty stomachs. You train boys to live with full stomachs and dessert. This difference explains everything about the war. Dr. John Dower, in his Pulitzer Prize-winning Embracing Defeat, Japan in the Wake of World War II, wrote, "The ice cream barge at Ulithi was worth more than a fleet of battleships as demonstration of American power." It said, "We can afford this. We have already won. We are simply waiting for you to realize it." Military historian Richard Frank noted, "Japanese forces fought expecting to die gloriously. American forces fought expecting to live comfortably. This wasn't just a different strategy. It was a different civilization's approach to warfare." Today, at the Kanoya Air Base Museum in Kagoshima Prefecture, a memorial to the kamikaze pilots who flew from this base, a small, often overlooked placard mentions American ice cream ships, added in the 1990s. It provides context for understanding the impossible disparity these pilots faced. The museum displays a kamikaze pilot's final meal, a small rice ball, pickled vegetables, and a cup of sake next to a photograph of the American ice cream barge at Ulithi, obtained from U.S. Navy archives. No explanation is needed. The image tells the entire story of the Pacific War. Museum curator Taishi Yamada explained, "We added this display because visitors, especially young people, couldn't understand how we lost so completely. When they see that America built ships just for ice cream while we scraped pine trees for fuel, they understand it wasn't just military defeat. It was the collision of scarcity with abundance." The story of Japanese commanders discovering American ice cream ships reveals the fundamental nature of power in modern warfare. Japan believed power came from spirit, from will, from the ability to endure unlimited suffering. America demonstrated that true power came from the ability to eliminate suffering, to provide abundance, to maintain normalcy even in extremity. The kamikaze pilots, noble in their sacrifice, flew into an enemy fighting a fundamentally different kind of war, while Japan scraped pine roots for fuel, producing 3,000 barrels from 34,000 distillation units. America built million-dollar ice cream barges, while Japanese pilots wrote death poems before their final 50-hour training flights. American sailors chose between vanilla and chocolate. While Japan measured victory in spiritual terms, America measured it in industrial output, including the output of ice cream at 10 gallons every 7 minutes. The war ended not when Japan ran out of pilots willing to die, they never did, but when Japanese leadership finally understood what they were fighting against. Not just military might, but a society so powerful it could dedicate ships to dessert, so confident it saw comfort as essential, so abundant it could afford to be wasteful with luxury items while fighting a global war. In the final analysis, the statistics tell everything. American ships at Ulithi, 722. Japanese ships in the entire Navy at peak, approximately 700. American ice cream production, 500 gallons per shift from one barge. Japanese aviation fuel from pine roots, 3,000 barrels total. American bomber crews making ice cream at 30,000 feet. Japanese pilots, 40 to 50 hours training on diluted fuel. American sailors complaining about ice cream flavors. Japanese sailors, 315 g of rice when available. Japanese commanders who discovered America had ships just for making ice cream discovered something more profound than military intelligence. They discovered they were fighting an enemy who had already won, who knew they had won, and who were so certain of victory, they brought dessert to the apocalypse. The ice cream ships proved what the atomic bombs only confirmed. Japan was fighting the last war of scarcity against the first war of abundance. The outcome was as inevitable as it was incomprehensible. To those who believed suffering was strength, they learned too late that true strength was having so much power you never had to suffer at all. The million-dollar ice cream barge at Ulithi, producing its 10 gallons every 7 minutes while Japanese pilots prepared to die, was not just a ship. It was proof of a civilization that had already won the war before it began. In their world of bitter pine root fuel and desperate sacrifice, American ice cream ships were not just incomprehensible. They were proof that Japan had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the war they were fighting. They had brought spirit to a contest of industrial abundance. They had brought suffering to a battle against comfort. They had already lost.